everybody, thanks for watching. So yeah, get right into this video. So I want to thank a lot of the people who I've been talking to over the last few weeks. A lot of Christians, a lot of people have been asking questions. A lot of people who watch my videos want more insight into what's going on, and a lot of people don't want to just accept what they've been told. And it's a lot of information out there. It's a lot that's been going on over the last few weeks. So one of the things that I've talked about before was the biblical manuscripts. I have plenty of videos when I get into this, because this is what we're looking to as the authority, as the information on Christianity and the Bible itself. This is what we're looking to, saying, because of these manuscripts, this must be true. Because these manuscripts exist, this must be true about the Bible and these stories. Because we have authorities, right? We have the church, the papacy, who is telling us, based upon these manuscripts, that these things are true. So you have to understand, and I don't think a lot of Christians understand this, that we are getting what we know as the Bible, as religion, biblical religion, the Abrahamic religions, from manuscripts, biblical manuscripts, besides, the Quran. So if we're going to accept this, then you need to understand everything about these manuscripts. What is it about them? Are we really accepting these, manuscripts as the end all be all in our religion? Or is it just the stories themselves, that we get caught up in the stories, and that's what people are accepting? And this is what I'm saying. People get caught up in the stories and the way they're being taught by the church as to how they believe in the Bible, and then everything that's around the stories. It's a lot to it. So this is going to be probably one of the most damaging videos to Christianity that's available, period. So this is going to be one of the most, if you watch my videos, I explain things. So I'm going to break this down to you. It's a lot to get into. I'm going to break this down to you in the best, easiest way possible, without using too many big words or terms or what have you, so that, anybody can really understand who is doing this research. And it's going to be, again, one of the most damaging videos to Christianity. And here's the thing, a lot of people think I'm just some hater. I just hate Christians and I hate Christianity. I'm an evil person. If you know my story, I grew up in church. My uncle was a preacher. I sung in the church choir. I was cool with everybody. This is what I love to do. I was a diehard Christian. If you knew me, I went to church all the time, twice a week. I literally joined the military because I believed I was fighting God's fight, right? This is what I was supposed to be a soldier in God's army, right? So when I set out to understand the Bible, I set out to prove it correct, because I did not like non-believers. I couldn't stand them. So I know how a lot of Christians feel about non-believers, but this is based upon my understanding of the Bible, me growing up in church, me having a uncle that's a preacher, me being close to the pastor, me being in the church choir, and everything that's surrounding the church. These are good people. They can't be wrong. We have a pope. We have churches everywhere. Who created it? It's how we get here. Bible has to be correct, right? So I grew up and I understand how people feel. So when I set out to, embark upon this work, I set out to prove it was true. And in doing so, traveling to these countries, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Israel, I've been everywhere. You name it, it was in the Bible, I've probably been there. And I set out to prove this stuff. And it wasn't to just, explain and express to people that this stuff is real. It was just for my own sake. I wanted to know. And again, as I always say, if you go out and you do the actual research, if you go to these countries, there's no way you're coming away still believing in the Bible, right? So the question right now, the thing that's in question right now, what a lot of people are latching on and holding on to, is the biblical manuscripts. And I want people to know this. First of all, there's some people who think I teach the same stuff as Billy Carson. I do not. So if you've seen any of my videos that has an Anunnaki logo or what have you, you didn't watch the video. So all those videos, if you see anything about me talk about Anunnaki, is me debunking that bullshit that Billy Carson talks about as far as Anunnaki and all this other craziness, right? So I will tell you if something is spooky. I will tell you if something is far-fetched, that I agree is far-fetched, but it just goes with the research. I in no way, shape, or form believe in what Billy Carson is teaching or has taught as far as Anunnaki stuff. Now, me and Billy do agree on some things as far as the craziness of the God in the Bible and some other crazy stuff with the Bible pertaining to slavery and what have you. So I agree with him on some of those aspects, but clearly not on everything. If you watch my videos, you understand what I talk about. I'm not no militant dude that's here, kill whitey and kill all white people and all this and that and everything that the crazy Hebrews talk about. I'm not with none of that. I'm simply about the truth. What is the fucking truth? That's all I care about. Because if the truth led me to Christianity or Islam or whatever, that's what I'd be following, right? So it's a thing called research and you have to do it. But it's a lot to get into. So let's get into these manuscripts so you can understand that we are really basing everything we know as Christianity on these things. And the biggest one of all, the biggest one, can't forget this one, faith. So now, here it is. Either Jesus existed and nobody wrote or talked about him, during the time he was alive up until years later after he died. Nobody said anything. Nobody wrote anything, right? So either that's the case, right? People just forgot about him, wanted to not relive the whole thing. Either that's the case or the whole thing is bullshit. It's made up. And it's made up to control the people, right? It's going to make sense, right? So you have to understand, right? What happens? Jesus crucified, Jesus dies, age 33, in the year, supposedly 33 AD. Now, after Jesus died, it is believed that a manuscript was written that they call Q, right? Q gospel, Q source. Q is like from the Greek, it's the Greek word QL, however you want to pronounce it. That means source. So they believe that a manuscript was written maybe 10 to 30 years after Jesus had died. And it was used, it's what Luke and Matthew possibly used to write their gospels. Now, we don't have a fragment of Q. It is a hypothetical manuscript that they think existed. There's absolutely no proof of Q. I call it a buffer. They're trying to attach as much as they can to the death time of Jesus up into, we start getting these manuscripts because it's a huge gap and it doesn't fit or make sense, right? So you have to make all this work somehow, and they just cannot. So Q would be like the first manuscript on their manuscript timeline. And they believe that Matthew and Luke used it basically when they was writing their gospels. Then we have the letters of Paul, right? So you guys know the story of Paul. You read Acts and, the story of Paul is in there. Paul, who was a Pharisee, who basically was going around and persecuting Christians, locking them up, just causing hell, having them killed, all kinds of craziness that Paul was doing. And remember, he was on the road to Damascus and he basically saw Jesus or heard Jesus or what have you. And that light that he saw blinded him for 3 days, right? 3 days he was blind. God sent somebody in there to heal him. And basically, he had to sit there and wait for instructions. So he basically got the instructions that he's supposed to go out and, just spread the word of Jesus and prophecy or what have you. And this is what he did. You guys know the story. He went out, he built churches, he spread the word, and he was arrested. And while he was in prison, he wrote letters. And this is what we have, the letters of Paul. And that's another big deal when it comes to the biblical manuscripts and the creation, leading up to the creation of the Bible, right? We have the letters of Paul that Paul wrote about 4 letters while he was in prison. And he is believed to have written 13 books of the New Testament, which no scholar agrees on this. They believe he wrote maybe around 6 that they can probably agree upon. They believe some of his followers wrote some of the books of the New Testament. But Paul is given a lot of credit for writing the majority of the New Testament, right? So we have that. Now, here's the thing. Same thing with Paul. We don't have the original letters of Paul. We have fragments, but those fragments are dated from the 2nd century CE. We don't have none during the time that he wrote them. The 2nd century CE is the oldest fragment that we have of Paul. So real quick, the lab, Jesus dies, 33 AD. We supposedly get Q, which we don't have any proof that Q ever existed, not even a fragment. You're supposed to get that around, 40 to 50, let's just say CE. And then right around the same time, we supposedly get the letters of Paul that we don't have the originals of either. We have fragments. We have P46. As you can see here, that's dated between Well, around the 2nd century CE, a little bit later, some believe, let's just say between 175 and 225 AD, right? This is the date that they put it around. So Paul is killed in Rome around 64, 67 AD. You don't really know exactly what date. In Rome, and we don't know how he died. Supposedly he was beheaded, but who knows? So we're talking about, 100, 200 years after the death of Paul that we have, a fragment, P46, of Paul's letters. And of course, again, they're going to say, well, wait a minute. No, it was written around, the life of Paul, but we don't have those. And this is what you have to understand. We do not have them. We don't have this stuff. So we got to go by the date that we have it. And then you have to understand everything that happens after that. We have copies of copies, and we'll get into that. So understand, this is the establishment, the beginning, because everything is going to be based off of what happened when Jesus died. And it's going to make sense of how this whole thing is lined up and who is responsible for what. So now also, right around the time that Paul supposedly writing these letters and everything's happening with Paul, we have the synoptic gospels that they believe are being written around the same time, around 50 to 67, let's say CE. Now, the synoptic gospels, we know Matthew, Mark, Luke. Synoptic just basically mean they're basically, similar. They follow a same pattern or what have you. John is different, right? So we have the synoptic gospels supposedly being written. It's the same story. We don't have the originals, right? We have P52, which is Raylan's papyrus, which you guys heard about, that we basically got around, the 1920s. And it's not like it was in a vault somewhere. It was sold in Egypt to was Bernard Grimfeld, I believe his name was, and it was translated in 1935, right? So it is dated back, and of course they don't agree on this date either. So it's dated between 125 and 175 CE, right? So those are the synoptic gospels, which we don't have the originals. We only have copies and fragments or what have you. Just like with Paul's letters, right? So now, again, timeline. Jesus' death. We have the Q, which basically don't exist. We have Paul's letters, and then we have the synoptic gospels being written around the same time they believe. But we don't have no originals. We only have copies of copies, and they are dated to the 2nd century CE. So now here's where it starts getting a little bit weird. So now, we don't have the names of the gospels. We don't get the names of the gospels, which some of you guys know this already. We don't get the names of the gospels until the 2nd century CE. Now, of course, this is debated, but understand there is no Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John until the 2nd century CE. Who knew that? Who didn't know that? A lot of people didn't know that. But there is no Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John until the 2nd century CE because there was no names on those gospels. Now, this is debated, but it's basically only debated by people who want to believe Irenaeus or not, right? So Irenaeus is the one who came forward and basically said, hey, Papias mentions this, and Papias was a follower of John. And John basically talked to Papias, and Papias wrote stuff down. So we can basically go through Papias to get confirmation or an eyewitness account of an apostle basically giving us scripture or giving us a manuscript or what have you, or let's just say sayings of Jesus or what have you. And the Christian apologists and the people who basically fight for the Bible and who want you to believe all this stuff, they swear by Irenaeus. Like, this is the one thing they got to go to. Irenaeus says, and it's what basically was accepted. So now, Papias was one of the apostolic fathers, which the apostolic fathers are like people who are influenced by the apostles or close to the apostles. Now, the apostles, of course, are the people who are basically considered to have the authority to speak on the behalf of Jesus, right? So everybody believed the apostles, and the apostles' word was basically the same as Jesus because they were basically granted the understanding that they are speaking on behalf of Jesus and continuing the word of Jesus or what have you after he's gone. So apostolic fathers, we already know, Barnabas, he's talked about that a lot, Billy Carson, Ignatius, Clement, and Polycarp, right? Polycarp. So Polycarp, and we're talking about Irenaeus here, Polycarp, well, Irenaeus was basically a student of Polycarp. Now, Irenaeus is saying that Papias was close to John, right? Now, if that's true, that would make Papias an eyewitness, as I said, an eyewitness to what John was saying, and that John was basically speaking to Papias and telling him, what's going on with the apostles and everything like that. Now, Papias was a companion of Polycarp. So now I know it gets a little bit confusing, but we'll break it down real quick again. So understand, you have Irenaeus saying that Papias was close to John. And because of that, we should listen to Papias basically naming the Gospels, saying that these people actually existed and wrote these things, right? And this is only according to Irenaeus, right? And Irenaeus is saying this because his teacher was Polycarp, who Papias was a companion of, and Polycarp was close to John, right? So real quick. Now, here's the problem with that. You have Eusebius. Now, Eusebius read Papias' book, right? And he's saying that, wait a minute, I read Papias' work, and nowhere in there is he claiming to be close to John. He, in his own words, said that he got his information from the elders, right? So it's like a line. When you start to understand, you have the apostles, right? Then you have the elders, and then you have the companions of the elders. So this is who he's saying he's spoken to, one of the companions, right? One of the companions to the elders close to the apostles or what have you. So through that line, it's not eyewitness account. It's not firsthand information. He heard from somebody who heard from somebody who heard from somebody. And then for us now, in this time, you got to understand, we are supposedly reading the word of a scribe who copied the manuscript, going way back. Supposedly that Papias said that he heard from a companion of an elder who heard from one of the apostles who heard from Jesus himself, right? Understand how this supposedly go. Long time later on. This is what you have to believe and accept if you accept in these manuscripts. But it's important because without Irenaeus saying this, then there's absolutely, which they all agree on it now, there's no way we get any of the names of the Gospels before the 2nd century. We don't. So a lot of people don't trust what Irenaeus is saying because of what I just said. It doesn't fit. It don't make sense. It's not enough proof of that. It's his word, which you have Eusebius saying that it's bullshit because he's saying nowhere did Papias say that he was close to John, but Papias is saying in his own writings that I basically got my information from those sources, not John himself, right? Nonetheless, they accept what is said, and they accept that this is enough information to basically say we can name these Gospels what we named them, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, we don't know if these people actually existed, but you need to understand that they are not named. You can Google this. You can look for yourself. I'll make this very easy in this video. Show you Google so you don't have to do it, but you can do it on your own. There's no naming. They are anonymous until the 2nd century CE. To me, that's big, and that should be something that you highly think about if you're a Christian. So now, based upon this, we can understand that the Gospels are not eyewitness accounts. So I know a lot of people don't want to accept that, but based on what I just said and what you can go and research for yourself, they are not eyewitness accounts. They're only said to be eyewitness accounts, but they can't be, right? So a lot of people want to say that scholars are in agreement that they're eyewitness accounts. No, they're not. Scholars are not in agreement on nothing pertaining to the Bible. And you have to look at the scholars and the people, the scientists, the researchers who do put out this information that is supporting biblical information. And you'll see, as I say all the time, these people are attached to the church. These people are funded by the church. Independent researchers and people who really do this will tell you the truth, that this is what the facts show. And it's up to you to have faith and believe or not. As I keep saying to you guys, at the end of the day, no matter what we compile as researchers, you have to have faith if you want to believe in the Bible, because the facts and the truth do not support what's being told and what's been taught to us over the years. So it's up to you to have faith or to keep digging and keep looking for the truth. And that's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. But none of this stuff has been proven. So we got to go and look. And look at the word gospel. Gospel itself doesn't mean like, facts, proof. Gospel literally translates to good news in Greek. Euangelion, I think it is, right? Euangelion in Greek. So it means good news. Now, what is news? News is something that somebody reports, right? A reporter reports news. Supposedly, you report, past or current events, stuff that you can look at and just talk about. And usually, if you're a good reporter, you have a source, right? And there's nothing better than an eyewitness account, a person that was literally there, that their testimony or their, information or input could go towards your story or your news to basically make the story acceptable, more believable. So if you have a witness and somebody who was there, that helps out. But the information that they say has to add up to the facts and it has to make sense and fit with everything, especially if, it's a legal situation because we don't in a court of law, stuff has to hold up to scrutiny and cross-examination, which, the stuff does not. So now what was Paul doing? Let's go back to Paul. What was Paul doing? Paul was writing letters, right? Paul's writing letters. He's sending them out to the churches. So remember, Paul's supposed to went out and set up all these churches all over and everything like that. So he's writing these letters and sending them out to the churches and let them know, hey, this needs to be done. Make sure that people understand the importance of Jesus and the sacrifice and everything like that. And remember, he's teaching around that time that, these people have to prepare, like the end is coming. I'll get into that later on. But he's preaching the gospel as if, this is going to happen within these people's lifetime. So these orders are basically going out from Paul to the churches, and the people are basically, taking them in and corresponding. But you have to think about it. So we have the letters of Paul that's going out, right? Paul had people follow him. Like these people had disciples. These people had students, right? Now, all these letters go into these different churches. These churches are speaking it to the people, right? Did they make copies of those letters? Now, you have to think about during this time that the letters of Paul sending the letters out to the churches, the people at the churches copying the letters, the people speaking this information to the people in the churches, all this stuff going on. Scribes, these people travel with scribes writing copies, what have you. And none of this stuff survived. None of it. Same thing with the synoptic gospels, right? You had these people writing this stuff down. They had scribes. The stuff went out. Now, they believe it was a circulation of this gospel at one point. None of it survived. It's all gone. Where is it? And we have fragments, but the fragments that we have is not until the 2nd century CE. So you have to understand, like, where is this big gap? Which, again, you have Paul who died around 64, 67 CE. So that's a long time where, we have a manuscript copy or fragment that is only dated until that time. Why is nothing we have dated before that? We have a copy of a copy that's dated, to the 2nd century CE. None of the other stuff survived, and it's something you have to think about. You also have to think about even around the time Jesus was alive, like people were writing, there were scribes, there was people doing things, right? And they want you to believe that everybody was illiterate, nobody wrote anything. It's just these scribes. If you were a scribe, that means your job was to copy, right? You wrote things down. So this was a job, and people who wrote things, and somebody writing stuff, that means somebody has to know how to read stuff. So it's weird to me that nobody wrote anything during the life of Jesus that survived, right? And you have to think about that. It's just so much that's wrapped up into the surviving of these manuscripts and the fact that we don't have any up until a certain point for whatever reason. You would think by now we would have found something from that time frame, and we have not. So we have all this copying going on, and it's not until the 4th century CE that we finally get the New Testament, right? We get the Bible. All this time has passed. A lot's going on. We finally get the Bible around the 4th century. So we have those fragments from the 2nd century. So a lot of time in between there where they finally decide to put this stuff together. Something had to happen. And it's something you got to look at history-wise to say, where does the dates fit? Where do the events fit around this time? So understand that churches back then was like the government, right? The churches back then was basically keeping everybody together and establishing laws. Because we're talking about a time where There's lawlessness going on. There's people raping and pillaging and all kinds of craziness going on. And what are you going to rally the people around to believe in to get them to accept your authority or law if you're not God, right? Who are you? You have to think back then. Think about now. We do stuff because there's the law. It's a legal system that we're under. But back then, it was not such a thing. Unless you was violating, common law. Don't kill, don't steal nobody's shit. Everybody knew that. Then what was there to keep people in check from doing certain things? Because even if you went and killed somebody or stole for somebody, there was really no law coming to get you or anything like that. So you have to understand, like, Paul's letters was going out, and that's basically was him telling them to basically, input all these things and make sure the people was not doing that. It's basically sort of laws that he's putting out there for the church to basically establish over these people when you really understand. I just wanted to go through that, but I'm going to get into what I believe is going on and what's happening. And I'm going to give you facts and proof and truth mixed with my thoughts, my research of what's going on, which my research is going to be backed up by real information, not just spooky stuff, right? So history, and I always talk about this. You got to look at history, understand what's going on around this time or what's happening. So whether you want to accept it or not, and they tell you straight to your face, history has been whitewashed. History has been changed. We all know this. We know that what we know about the ancient world is not what they told us. Now, whether you want to accept it or not, Rome, Italy, was populated by Black people. We know the Etruscans were Black. This is something you can look up on your own. Now, they don't want to admit that these people were entirely Black, but they will admit that there was some Black people within the Etruscan Empire. And they'll say they were either slaves, but they will also say that they were free people. Nonetheless, we can say that it was Black people in the Etruscan Empire, right? Just give us that part, right? We can say that. You can look at a lot of the statues and figures that exist, which proves this because they're Black. We also know about the Greek Empire being Black. We understand what's going on around this time. Again, history has been whitewashed. You have to understand and look at that. And, what if I told you that there was a plan? I mean, possibly even before Kemet fell, between the Greeks and the Romans to basically conquer what they conquered. There was already an established plan between the Greeks and the Romans to conquer what they already conquered. So we're talking about Europe, we're talking about Northern Africa, right? We're talking about a lot of these lands that a plan was already in place. Because you have these people basically connecting and conquering around the same time. And we have the Greco-Roman era. Now, it depends on who you talk to. The data is all over the place. That's a long time. Nonetheless, I'm going to read this here. It says, the Greco-Roman period 332 BC to 395 AD marks the end of Persian rule over Egypt. The Persians, who came from what is now known Iran, were defeated by the Greek conqueror Alexander the Great, who occupied Egypt and founded a new capital city at Alexandria. When Alexander's empire was divided after his death in 323 BC, his general Ptolemy acquired Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. Greek was the official language of Egypt under the Ptolemies. Greek influence in art, administration, and military organizations continued for the next 300 years. The traditional gods were still worshipped, but new gods were also introduced. I'll say that again. But new gods were also introduced. The Romans gradually began to intervene in Egyptian affairs, and in 30 BC, they conquered Egypt, which we know before that they conquered the Greek Empire. I believe it was in the 3rd century BC. It became a province of the Roman Empire. Roman influence affected every part of Egyptian life, from household utensils to religion. Roman emperors continued to be depicted as traditional pharaohs on temple reliefs. So you have this Greco-Roman Empire. Who are they conquering, right? Who are they conquering? You are led to believe that they're conquering other white folks, which cannot be further from the truth. So first of all, there is people just want to be super duper cocky and ignorant about it. And we could just go back to proven facts. First of all, you can look it up on your own. Black skin, Black people were here long before white folks, right? And I don't want to get into that whole thing, but you can do all the research on your own. There's multiple TEDs on it. There's multiple research. You can look at Dr. Jim Lee, look at Dr. Keith Chang, and all these people who show you, and we have the mutation. We understand what happened, but Black people were here first. So to say that you occupy a land that was already occupied by Black folks is absolutely crazy. Who were you conquering, right? So you mean to tell me that you can go through the whole out of Africa theory or the whole migration pattern, and we can see that Africans did this, but they didn't do this? It don't make sense. So you have to understand, again, history has been changed. It has been whitewashed. They don't want to admit who was where for many reasons. But you got to look at it, understand what was going on around this time and the conquest that took place. So here we have proof. We have on record of the Romans and Greeks introducing new gods, right? This is long before Christianity. This is before we get established writings of Judaism, which we don't get until Ptolemy II Philadelphia's with the Septuagint Greek, right? So before this, we have already the establishment of these gods, these creations by the Greeks and Romans. And we know about Serapis Christos. I always show you guys this. Me in the Cairo Museum showing you what happened. First of all, there's absolutely no depictions of Greeks just dressing like Egyptians before the conquest. So obviously their plot was to take over the Egyptian empire and steal their shit, even their clothes. That's exactly what they did, right? So we know they stole everything. They changed stuff around. We have this stuff there. This is me in the Cairo Museum in the Greco-Roman section in Egypt. This is from the Greco-Roman era. Greco-Roman, when they came into Kemet and tried to basically, be like us, steal our shit. You see they statues here, they're putting their own little section. They actually came into Kemet and carved themselves into a lot of the walls. Here is the actual statue of Serapis Christos right here. You can see him. Serapis. You can see when they had Zeus, Ammon. So you can see where the stuff came from. Zeus, Ammon. Everything that we tell you about this stuff, it's all here. But look at the face, clearly. This is the Greco-Roman era. You see how they try to decree themselves like us. Make stelas. See, it's all in Greek. Bullshit, all here. So now anybody can go and research this stuff. You can go look for yourself. You can go look online. You can go to Kemet yourself and see it. Now, I took this picture right here personally. I show you guys this all the time. What does this look like? This is a picture of Serapis Christos, right? Looks like Jesus to me. Look like where they got the depiction of Jesus to me, right? This is how long before Jesus, right? Hundreds of years before Jesus, and we have this. Sun rays, crown of thorns, the whole nine, right? So you have to look at this to understand we have established that the Romans, the Greeks, what was the New Testament written in? Greek. What was the Septuagint written in? Greek, right? And I always talk about Dr. Joseph Yehuda, who wrote Hebrew is Greek. It's a rare book. If you find it, it's going to run you about $7,000 or more. And in that book, Hebrew is Greek, he proves that the Greeks created, or the Hebrew and Arabic languages come from the Greeks, right? Hebrew is Greek. There's a reason why you can't find this book. There's a reason why this book is so expensive. So in that book, he's basically outlining, where that language came from and that it came from Greek, right? So you have to look at all this, and you have to look at the fact that when Kemet fell, when Egypt fell, and they was trying to push these new gods on the Egyptians already knew. We know Serapis is just a mix of Osiris and Apis, both bulls, when you really understand. And they wasn't accepting this doctrine. They wasn't accepting what was being taught. Indoctrination took place. There's a reason why Rome continued Hellenization along with the Greeks, and then long after they conquered Greece. Remember, Hellenization continued up until the 4th century and even longer, depending on who you talk to. It continued through Rome. Why would they continue that? What was going on? What was being put out? So you have to understand what was going on and what took place as far as this teachings. Now, if they're showing you that they were trying to instill gods that they created onto the people, what makes you think the same thing is not happening with Christianity? Rome conquers Greece in the 3rd century. When do we get Judaism in Rome? The 3rd century. And as I showed you, and as you can go look for yourself, we can prove, one, you had black people in Rome, in Italy, right? The Etruscans are considered the indigenous people of Italy, not just Rome, Italy, right? Indigenous people, original people. So we know black people in Rome. We know black people in Greece. We know black people in Spain. We can prove all of this. Where the fuck did they go? Where are they? Now, I've been all 3 places. Been to Rome, been to Greece, been to Italy, been to Egypt, been everywhere, right? We know Egyptian Empire is black. We understand that. Herodotus attests to this. So many other people attest to this. You can go there and see for yourself, right? It was black. And I showed you guys some people who still don't want to believe that it was black as early as the 1930s. You can go back and look at any of those old pictures. Check them out here for people who still don't want to believe. You can go look at these pictures from the 1920s, 30s, and see black people in Egypt. Take a look at these pictures. And again, you have to understand that if you really know Kemet, if you know Egypt and you go and look, there is no other people who fit the style, the culture of the Egyptians. Look at the hair. You think that Arabs have this hair? You think that Europeans have this hair? The braids that we have in the Egyptian museum? The dress, the style of dress that we can still find in African tribes today is out there. We can still find the stuff. We can still see the stuff. So people who still don't want to believe, find me a European civilization or an Arab civilization that dress like that, all right, to have hair like that pertaining to the Egyptians. You won't find that. So you can keep on believing all of the whitewash stuff you want. The proof is there. And you have European scholars saying this, not just me. You have European researchers saying this, not just me. So the proof is out there. All you gotta go do is go look for yourself. You'll find the proof. It exists. So what's going on here? What am I saying? Understand, one, they understood the power of religion when it comes to the people, right? They understood how it brought these people together in these lands that they conquered. So we know the majority of the people was what they call pagans, right? They were pagans. They, believed in nature and worshiped the sun. Sun worship is rampant throughout the ancient world. I talked about Sol Invictus, which is what Constantine was a worshiper of before he converted to Christianity. He worshipped Sol Invictus, which is worshiping the sun, which is what pagans did, which is what everybody did across the world. We find sun worship, right? This is what was going on. Obviously, when Rome and Greece came in there, they wanted to change all this. So they changed religions. They created new gods and indoctrinated these people. This is a generational thing that you start with the kids, and the kids keep it and they pass it down and so on and so forth, right? You have to understand that. And this is one of the reasons why the Hebrew Israelites, the ninjas that be out there on the corner, say that, the original Jews were black. Why do they say that? The original Jews were black. Because obviously the Greeks, as what I'm alluding to, came up with the Jewish doctrine, right? They came up with it. So let me bring all this together, right? Because you have to look again at history. History is going to tell you what basically happened. And it's a lot of history that is not talked about. It's a lot of people and events that are not talked about. And a lot of people, unless you study history, you're not going to figure this out. So one, understand again, we had Jews come into Rome, 2nd century, right? We know about the Jewish war in 70 AD, right? We know about the Jewish temple being destroyed, all this information that they put out. So you have to understand now what's going on, what's happening. You have Jews coming into Rome. So Rome had conquered Greece. We have the Greco-Roman Empire and all this stuff going on. They have the Greeks obviously copying and writing manuscripts or what have you. The Greeks are putting out this information because that's what people spoke. So we have this going on. And obviously we have now citizens who are Jews. Now, let's just say, for argument's sake, the majority of the citizens are Jews. You have scattered pagans here and there, what have you, people who are not believing in Judaism. Now, then Christianity comes along. Now, they want you to believe Christianity began with Jesus, and then Jesus died, and you have his disciples who's basically continuing on Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? But of course, you have Jews who don't want to accept Jesus as being the Mashiach, the Messiah, or what have you, for many reasons. So obviously, there was problems with the Jews and the Roman Empire that led to the first Jewish temple being destroyed and the first revolt, right? That was subsided, and then more time goes on. You read about taxation and unfair treatment, a lot of ways that was persecuting the Jews around that time, and a lot of stuff that was going on around that time, right? So what I'm saying to you, what you have to understand, these Jews were Black people. These Jews could have been white too, could have been mixed in, Arab, what have you, but majority Black people. Just look at it this way, for argument's sake. And it's a lot going on, and it's Rome understanding the power that the Greeks had over these people. Because again, why else would you continue Hellenization? They had a Roman emperor. They had their own culture and customs, right? You go through all this conquest just to accept what the Greeks put out, not your own doctrine, your own culture and customs, but what the Greeks created. So obviously they're running civilization based upon this religion, letting these people do them, and they're basically taxing these people and collecting money and doing everything they need to do, feeding off these people. A lot of stuff going to start to sound familiar, right? It's the same MO, feeding off these people. So what happens? What happens? Time's going on, Jewish temple supposedly fell. We had this first revolt. Then what happens? Shimon bar Kokhba, right? Shimon or Simon bar Kokhba, however you want to pronounce it. Most of you never heard of it. If you study history, then you understand. This is the one they don't really want you to know about because it connects too many fucking dots, right? So Shimon bar Kokhba, it was a revolt, right? Because understand the Jewish teachings. So the Jews, remember, they believed in a Messiah would come, right? And they believed in that. Now, here you have the Greeks, you have the Romans, and they sitting back laughing it up, counting their money because they know there's some bullshit that they created, right? Taxing the people and getting the people to stay within the society, whatever they got going on. They know it's some bullshit, but the people don't. And this is what you have to understand. When you see these revolts and these religious wars on what's going on, it's not the higher ups because they already know what's going on. It's the people who bought in. It's the people who believe, like a lot of these Christians out here, they believe in this stuff. They truly believe in it, believe in the prophecy because the society is so wrapped around the religion. They're born into it. So they're looking around like you are looking around today and saying, well, all these people can't be wrong. Then you have a man, Shimon bar Kokhba, who rises up and the people rally behind him and they believe he could be the Messiah. He could be the one. He believes it himself, right? So they rally behind him and everything comes to a crazy, crazy, crazy climax, right? So I'm going to read here real quick. You can go look at this for yourself. The Bar Kokhba revolt, right, was a large-scale armed rebellion initiated by the Jews of Judea. So understand, this is Judea we're talking about. This is Roman Empire, part of the Roman Empire because they controlled it. Led by Shimon bar Kokhba against the Roman Empire in 132 CE. If you've been paying attention, your mind should fucking explode right now. Lasting until 135 or early 136. It was the third and final escalation of the Jewish-Roman wars. Like the first Jewish-Roman war and the second Jewish-Roman war, the Bar Kokhba revolt resulted in a total Jewish defeat. Bar Kokhba was killed by the Roman troops at Betard in 135, and the Jewish rebels who remained after his death were all killed or enslaved within the next year. Now understand, this all happened under Roman Emperor Hadrian. he was ruthless. He was pissed. Because understand what the Jews did. The Jews dug tunnels. A lot of the pictures you see of these tunnel systems was dug by the Jews in Judea. And they dug these tunnels through all of the Roman stations where the Roman soldiers was, and they would pop up, kill the guards, pop back in there, right? So they made the hole so narrow that only they could get through because they knew what was down there. So the Roman soldiers would have to basically take off their armor, take off their shield, climb through there with a knife, and basically figure out what was going on. And when they got, through the hole before they can get out, they smashed their head in, stabbed them to death or what have you, and and that was the end of them. And they knocked out so many soldiers. Once the word got back to Hadrian, he sent in troops from Britain, from all across the Roman Empire, from everywhere, came there. But the people fought with them. The people fought with the Jews, and not just the soldiers. And when they seen the troops coming, they took them out. They killed thousands of them and they sent them into a retreat. Hadrian basically had to fucking, write to Rome and let them know what was going on. He was embarrassed. And then they basically sent every soldier possible there. And, they completely wiped out men, women, and children killed, babies killed, all that stuff. So I like to tell people, one, a lot of the stuff you read about the persecution of the Christians in the New Testament is stuff that was actually happening to the Jews that they just put in there when you really understand. Now, this isn't a biblical story. This happened. This proof. We have documentation of this whole revolt that took place. But now, Hadrian wasn't done. He was still mad and embarrassed after all that. So he completely, in Judea, outlawed everything Jewish. What was done to these people was crazy. So you have in Judea, which is Judea. I mean, just think about what I'm saying here. You have Jerusalem, you have Judea, everything that's pertaining to Jesus Christ, right? And in Rome, the same thing. In Rome, the Jews, they was persecuted. They wasn't able to practice. A lot of Jews fled and basically left the Roman Empire around this time. And you had Jews that remained, of course. So, in case you ain't put it together yet, what was the date that I gave you? 130, let's just say, between 130, 135 CE. Why is it that all the manuscript copies and fragments that we have are around the same time, or dated to around the same time frame, right? Because now you have to look at it, right? These people witnessed a revolt. The people coming together believing that the Mashiach has come. This is the Messiah. We're going to revolt. We're going to take back our land, so on and so forth. The prophecy is going to be fulfilled. And it's what you give people to keep them going, right? And these people believed in it. So now the numbers say they killed over 500,000 Jews. Right? They wiped out more than half the population of Jewish people in that revolt. And then a bunch scattered, we had some left. But you have to think and believe that the people were left were majority, Jews. And they also want you to believe that there were some Christians and Christianity was established around this time. But you got to be critical and think that, one, if these people are living alongside these Christians and they are Jews, they are obviously at some point they have to be friends or get along. It don't make sense. Something is wrong, especially for the scale of attack that took place, right? So you have to look at it. Let's just say this land was specifically, Jews or black folks, and they came in there and they had, stations set up, taxations set up. Who knows who was living there? But it was a system going on that was persecuting the Jews specifically. Obviously in place, right? So also we read that, once this land was basically taken, that province of Judea was renamed Syria Palestina as an extended punishment for the Jews and as a result of the desires of the region non-Jewish inhabitants. And it says the Jews were also subjected to a series of religious edicts by the Romans, including an edict that barred all Jews from entering Jerusalem. The Bar Kokhba also had philosophical and religious ramifications, Jewish beliefs in the Messiah was abstracted and spiritualized, and rabbinical political thoughts became deeply cautious and conservative. The rebellion was also among the events that helped differentiate early Christianity from Judaism. Now, you would think all this time that they're supposedly coexisting, which would be over 100 years, they would already have, a differentiation of the two, right? But you have to understand, and this is what I'm saying in my research again. One, the reason why those dates are so close because now you have wiped out half of the Jewish people, right? They really believed the Messiah had came back, and now he was defeated. One of the names that they call Bar Kokhba was Kokhba, which means son of the star, right? And they really believed that this was it. This was the revolt. So now again, you have to take the spirituality of these people, and now the Messiah has returned, supposedly, and these people is wiped out. So of course, for the remaining people, they're no longer really believing in this religion, right? They're not really believing in it. And again, remember, we have this long time to where the Jews was accepting of the Greek Old Testament. And then all of a sudden we have this conversion, we have this Christianity come along, right? And you have to look at it. And it's like, well, obviously we have to give them a new testament, a new covenant. So that should strike a chord with some of you. They begin to differentiate, Judaism from Christianity, right? It should make you think a little bit deeper about the whole situation because, like I said, you would think by now, since we're talking about Judaism being in the Roman Empire for so long and Christianity existing supposedly since the 1st century, right? So, supposedly manuscripts are floating around. People are setting up churches. All this stuff is supposed to be going on like we just went through in this video. You would think that people will understand this understanding of Christianity, but I'm going to tell you why they don't. Because it didn't exist. It didn't exist. And if you can't see that yet, then you don't want to see it. We don't get the biblical manuscripts. People start getting manuscripts to the 2nd century. The Gospels are not named. What more do you need to understand, right? So we're going to go back. Let's go back to Serapis. Now, what a lot of people don't understand, one, is Serapis continue to be worshipped. Even though we can go back and find Serapis, we're talking about the 4th century, 5th century BCE. We can find around, let's just say between the 3rd and 4th century BCE, we're finding Serapis. We know about Frank Gaudio, who brought the statue out of the water, talked about him a lot. I showed you guys the depiction when I was in Egypt, but it's everywhere, right? Now, the thing is, Serapis, because we had this Greco-Roman era, Serapis followed from Kemet, from Egypt, into Rome, right? And there's statues of Serapis everywhere in Rome. Now, we're talking about a deity that existed long before Jesus, that just so happens, Jesus looks like him, right? Then you couple that with the fact that we know that the Greco-Roman era, the Greeks and the Romans was creating gods, right? So they're telling you straight out, dude, we created fake gods for you to worship, right? They created them. When you go and do the research on this, you'll see this is basically what Ptolemy wanted to do. We need to create a god that the people can identify with, both sides, basically. They created, like, what is wrong with y'all? See, this is my problem. My problem is I'm too believing in people doing research, because I really just be thinking that people actually go and read stuff and do research. And I'm seeing, I've been seeing this, but it's like, the way people argue and cuss you out about stuff, you think that they went and did research. And I'm seeing everybody's frauds. These people just watch YouTube videos. They don't read no books. They don't do no actual research. I talked about this years ago. And I would think people would have just watched the videos, but I guess not. But nonetheless, let's get back into this. Serapis has been around all through Rome. Now, it's weird that you go in ancient Rome and you find statues of Serapis everywhere. And there was also statues of Serapis in Judea. Why would there be statues of Serapis in Judea? Think about that. There was also the worship of Serapis in Judea. Why would they be worshiping Serapis in Judea? You got to think about that. And then when you start understanding these stories, you connect dots, right? Because you would see that, Hadrian was a worshiper of Serapis, right? So he used to go into Egypt and bring stuff back. And it was this whole cult of Serapis that was everywhere, that was flooded. Now, you'll also read when you start doing this research that, the Christians was upset and people was mistaking the worship of Jesus with the worship of Serapis because his name was Serapis Christos, right? He was the followers of Serapis was called the anointed. It was called Christians, right? It depends on what or who you read, but everybody is attesting to this. They were called followers of the anointed. So many things that we would pertain to Jesus was being called by these people. Now, the cover-up, as we just talked about before, they covered up history. And there's a huge cover-up with all this that they're not really getting into all the information. But if you actually go and dig, it's not so far-fetched. It makes the most sense because there's absolutely nothing of Jesus that we find during this time. But during the life of a person who we know was made up and we know didn't exist, there's statues, there's people talking about them. Right. But of course, they put it in the Bible. Christians they're not supposed to have any idols. How convenient. They shouldn't have any idols or statues. You understand? Everybody else throughout the ancient world, statues, idols, that's part of the worship. Or else who would you know that you're worshiping? If you're just going to say, I don't want you to show me or paint me or idol worship me, then Jesus should have came down and talked to the people the same way he came down and talked to Paul. You understand what I'm saying? We're talking about millions of people dying, wars, everything, when he could just come down the same way he came to Paul and show people, hey, I am the Christ, yada, whatever. And then that's it. It's game. We don't got to go through all this stuff we went through. Just talk to the people. That goes for the Old Testament as well. You want people to be Christians or people to follow a certain doctrine. What is this? Right? Then you have to look at the convenience of the doctrine. First of all, one, we have with the Old Testament, the chosen people, the Jews, the chosen people, God's people, chosen people, da-da-da. Then we have this war that happened. These people are sitting and waiting for this Mashiach who never comes. They thought he came, they got wiped out. But they're sitting there and they're waiting. Who does that benefit? The whole time you're waiting, you're being taxed. You're being worked to death, right? We're taking stuff from you. We're using you. And that benefits the power structure, which why, if you're enslaving people, why, if you're persecuting people, why would you allow them to keep their religion? It don't make sense. So they're not looking at this because the people are actually believing in the religion. So you got to look at it and understand. One, Serapis was everywhere. You had with Hadrian, he built his villa, he built his house. And put a replica. First of all, there's a lot of replica statues of Serapis all over Rome, as I said, from the BC times. So it says here, Serapis under the Romans and eventual decline, right? The worship of Serapis did not end with the close of the Ptolemaic era. Instead, it found new life and continued to flourish under Roman rule. The Romans, much like the Ptolemies before them, recognized the value of cultural and religious syncretism as a tool for political stability. As such, they not only tolerated but actively promoted the cult of Serapis, integrating it into their own religious practices. Under Roman rule, Serapis was often equated with Jupiter, the king of the Roman gods, and Pluto, the god of the underworld. And as I said, they was going to build their whole temple of Jupiter where what made the Jews revolt. But we understand this is for Serapis. This association with key figures of the Roman pantheon helped to ensure the continued relevance and popularity of Serapis among the Roman populace. The Romans also adopted the Greek practice of associating Serapis with healing, leading to his veneration in the Roman healing cults. The Serapeum of Alexandria The primary temple of Serapis continued to be an important religious and cultural center under Roman rule. When the original Serapeum was damaged by fire in the late 1st century CE, it was the Roman Emperor Hadrian who ordered its reconstruction, underscoring the significance of Serapis in the Roman religious landscape. He built basically a replica of the Serapeum in his backyard. It's still there to this day. However, the cult of Serapis also faced challenges during this period. The rise of Christianity in the 4th century CE led to increasing tensions between pagans and Christians. 4th century. What? This culminated in the destruction of the Serapeum of Alexandria in 391 CE by a mob of Christian zealots, marking the end of the temple and a significant blow to the cult of Serapis. Why is Serapis existing in the 4th century CE in Rome, let alone Egypt? Why is the cult of Serapis existing for so long to where a Roman emperor has to intervene in it? Because they kept it going. That's what I've been telling you. They kept the Greco-Roman Empire going. Why would they do that? Why would they do that if not to follow what the Greeks was doing? That's exactly what I just read to you. They understood the importance of basically religion and people following this stuff, right? So everybody in the ancient world doing the same thing but the Christians. So see how it all fits in. There's no Christianity before the 2nd century. They want you to believe that. We don't have no manuscripts. We don't have no proof at all. We have people saying something. All of a sudden, after this whole war happens, we start getting manuscripts. We start getting these stories. Right around the same time, we have the cult of Serapis still going on. So obviously, this is what happened. Once they wiped out basically all the Jews, a lot of them fled. They left. And you had them bringing in their people. And I talked about this before. We've seen migrations of the Europeans coming into Northern Africa and other parts of Europe for a long time. You see it a lot. I showed you guys the ships. It's just what's been happening. So now you're basically taking the place. So if you want to understand what happened, so if the Jews were black, what happened that they became, white and Arab or European and Arab? This is what happened, right? When was it when the Jews returned to Israel? It was like the 1930s, 40s, right? When they just started coming back to Israel because it was some bullshit. Now you had the Palestinians ruling, as we talked about, and them there, but then you have these people who are supposedly returning that's been scattered. That's now basically the conversion of what was the original Jews, which was the black Jews. This is why Hebrews will tell you, well, wait a minute, you go to Africa, there's a bunch of African tribes, the Igbo, and these people claiming to have been Jews or from the biblical Jews or, from, the line of the Jews. And it's true, but these people were scattered. And then now they're looking at the story and saying, okay, that's the scattering that they're talking about. Now understanding, one is long past, hundreds of years ago. So the story is a little different because we don't get the Masoretic text until the 11th century, right? So it's a whole bunch of years, centuries later, after this whole thing that happened with Shimon, Kokhba. So the story's changed, it's different. They believe that they are scattered because of what happened with the biblical thing, but it's because of what happened with this war that is documented. So now you have this creation of Christianity and these people being indoctrinated into Christianity that's in this zone. How was it for so long you have all these Jews accepting the Greek doctrine and worshiping under the Greek text for a long time? Then it's just gone. It's gone. Then we have the rise of Christianity because they basically converted the worship of Serapis into Christianity. If you didn't get that yet. That's what happened. Now we got to get rid of Serapis because we're going to transform this motherfucker into Jesus Christ. We're going to transform it. So now during this period, all of the paintings are being wiped out. The people are being wiped out. Everything is happening. But these people kept coming back. There's a lot more history to get into that we don't got time for. But the people kept coming back. A lot of stuff kept popping up because you would imagine if people were still worshiping and having these ceremonies and they didn't want this stuff to be around. So the cult of Serapis was systematically wiped out. And remember, like I showed you guys the statues. I showed you guys what was happening in Egypt. We have proof. There's no statues of Jesus. There's no writings of Jesus. We have writings about Serapis. We have people who attest throughout history, throughout that time frame about Serapis Christos and him existing. When you go do your research and look into everything that is Serapis, you'll see how much it pertains to Jesus Christ. It's just ridiculous, bro. Like, it's like, I can't believe that people are not taking the time to really look into this. Now, to Bible-believing Christians, it's going to sound far-fetched. Some people probably laughing, but they should be laughing at themselves for being grown-ass men and women believing in talking snakes and donkeys. That is way more far-fetched than what I just gave you in this video, which we have actual proof to back up, right? Things that we can see right now that's real. You're not seeing no flying fire chariots. You're not seeing no ark. You know, none of this stuff exists. Nobody talked about this man. Nobody. Where we have people who we know exist was talked about. That was written about. There's statues. There are things that we can look at and prove that this person was real. We can't do that with Christianity at all. It's just nothing there. So they want to keep you wrapped up in the manuscripts, the so-called history, and the papacy did this. You know, the Council of Nicaea, the edict of this. And the Rome and the papacy coming in, doing everything that they did to turn this thing into what they turned it into. You understand? Because now we can move out of these little Roman areas and these areas we done conquered and conquer the world. So as I said, they had a plan. And then we can see that plan. One, now, if you are creating the Holy Roman Empire, you cannot go out and be killing people and doing all kinds of things. You have to hide behind somebody. And this is where we have the Arabs come into play. Right? Arabs come into play and they're wiping out many African territories and African nations, taking them out. We know what happened with Spain. We know what happened to Northern Africa, wiping them out, right? And then we have the Crusades later on. And the Crusades happened, and anybody that was against the papacy and what was going on, if you had any of the documentation from any of the religions back in the day, any of that stuff, all that stuff was burned, people was killed, people was tortured, to wipe all that out to make Christianity the valid, religion across, basically the world besides the Arab world. And it's what happened. It's the empire, right? The empire. Empire strikes back. The empire came into play, and then that was game. Once the papacy took place, that was it. So you got to ask yourself, why the 4th century? So supposedly we had Christianity for hundreds of years, and we had these churches being built, Christian churches. We had these people going around preaching this gospel for hundreds of years, yet none of the followers wrote anything. None of the followers left anything behind that would just at least give us a hint that they were Christians, or, what was the preacher speaking from? Where's those manuscripts? There's nothing. We don't have anything. So just all of a sudden, poof, 2nd century, now we start getting these things. Right. And then it still took them a couple hundred more years to actually set up, a Bible, the real established Christianity. So it's a lot that I left out in this video, man. It's a lot to get into. I mean, just as I talked about before, one, the symbol for Christianity was not Jesus. It's a different symbol. It was basically the symbol that Constantine supposedly saw on Milvian Bridge. And we know that the logo, you might as well say, was of the lamb, the sacrificial lamb. And this is all, after the 2nd century, once it started being established. And then they eventually say, hey, you know what? We need to put a man in this place, a man that could be worshipped. And we know it's so many things that's spoken about around that. And they clearly got the vision or, the image of that man from Serapis. What I don't understand, man. What more do you need to see? I mean, clear as day. This right here existed long before Jesus, yet it looks like Jesus. And we see all the statues. I mean, what more do you need to see? So I don't know. It is what it is. Like I said, Christians still going to believe whatever they want to believe. But for the people that was on the fence, for the Christians that I talked to, that, wanted some more clarity, here it is. And again, this is my interpretation. This is from my research. But I promise you, if you go do your own research, you're going to run into the same shit. And you have to understand what, and the thing is this, man, you got to know what books to read. You got to know where to go. You got to know what to look for. And people don't even know how to Google, because if you ask Google certain questions, they will give you the wrong answer multiple times. And it's confusing sometimes. So it's one of the reasons why I've been throwing Google stuff up there, because I know a lot of people Google stuff because they send it to me when they're trying to debate me online through emails. They send it to me, and I'll be like, "This is wrong. Google doesn't say this," and then I'll type it in a different way, and they'll say the opposite. All to confuse you. It's all the mess with you. You have to understand, and it's not a contradiction because the one that you put in that's correct is going to be backed up with that information. So in other words, if you ask the wrong question, it's going to give you the answer they want to give you. But if you put in enough information, then it'll give you the right answer. And it's just how it works. It is the same. It's the same way with Wikipedia. But you have to know how to use it. And a lot of people do not. And it's not something that you should be Googling for a wide range of information, but just to look for books about certain things pertaining to that topic. And then a lot of times, you can fucking get the PDF, or you can read a little excerpt or some of the book online for free without purchasing the book. So that helps a lot of people as well. But you guys got to look at this. You got to know how to do the research. And it's a lot more to this that we're going to get back into real quick. But just step back and look at the whole picture and see this is where your Christianity comes from. Everything I just talked to you about the biblical manuscripts, this is the history of it. This is what you want to accept. We get, it's a bunch of bullshit. Again, before the 2nd century, you got to have faith. And then soon as, after the 2nd century, you still got to have faith because there's really nothing. Now you got to believe in, hey, these manuscripts was copied from something, but from what? We don't have the originals. And ask yourself, why would God, everything God does in the Bible, he's not going to preserve the original books. Why wait so long to even give it to us in the first place? If you see that for hundreds of years, this worship of Serapis, right? And you know that you're God and what you're going to do with Jesus and how they're going to use Serapis, as the image of Jesus, and you don't stop none of that? Huh? You don't stop what happens to the Jews in Judea, which is like, south of Galilee where Jesus was supposedly born? It don't make sense. Like common sense, look at everything. Put the pieces together. I gave it to you right here. So it's up to you guys to accept it or not. So now you got to use your brain to really think critically about all this stuff because the dates don't add up. Common sense wise, stuff don't add up. The fact that we don't have any writings about Jesus during the time that he was around, but we supposedly have all these manuscript copies and people writing manuscripts and Paul's, the letters, and everything else that's been going on relatively close to Jesus's death, and none of it exists. We don't have anything. We don't get anything until the 2nd century CE. We don't even get the names of the Gospels until the 2nd century CE, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John don't exist until then, according to, real scholars and people who look into this whole thing. But even still, we don't have proof because when you go back and look at the older manuscripts, their names are not on them. And we don't have any ones prior to that, right? We don't have any 1st century manuscripts. We don't have them. So you have to look at the proof and what makes the most sense. What looks like it could have been, because clearly it's not what they're telling us. It's not, it can't be. There's nothing to back it up. And then you still have to believe in all the spookism, crazy shit that's in the book. Because even if, and this is what I said before, even if you want to accept the manuscripts, if you want to accept the Bible and everything in it, it requires faith because there's no proof in any of that shit ever happening. So I know a lot of people, they like West. They like West because he's talking about the manuscripts and they think that it somehow gives validity to the Bible. It does not. It ends there with the manuscripts existing. Anybody can go online and you can print out a copy of any freaking papyrus that you want. P1 all the way up to 1,000,000. Whatever one you want, you can print it out and have it. You can translate it. You can look at it and read it. Not one of them proves the stories. And in many cases, you don't have the entire stories. And when you learn to read the languages, you will read, one, it is not the same as this. It is not the same as your King James Bible. It's different. And I've shown you guys this. I've read it to you in Greek. It's not the same as the King James Bible. It's not the same. So even the King James Version is not the same of, the later versions. This is pre-1950s. I always tell you guys, if you find the Bible that's, in the 1940s, you want that one. I believe this was like 1946 or something like that. You want an old Bible because it's still different, right? And I talked about the Masonic Bible, how it's different and how you have to read this. We got into this in the society, what you need to know about this book and why it exists. The fact that this book exists, you should question everything. The fact that this exists and it's a Bible. Why is it a Bible? Huh? These people are supposed to be the most evil people on the planet. Why do they have a Bible, right? You need to think about that because the best place to hide something is in plain sight. And they hid it in here. They hid it in here. The stories can't be proven. They're not true. You need to understand, oh yeah, no, I'm not a Mason. I have a Masonic Bible. I have Masonic friends. But I never was, never will be a Mason. So, don't start that. But you have to look at everything. The biggest thing to look at is the history itself. I'm not going to get into the biblical stories and, what's being said in there about what. If you want to accept that as real history, go ahead. It's not proven history, which is why it requires faith. I broke down how all this stuff has to pass empirical research, right, to be proven. Nothing biblical has. The manuscripts has not. The stuff has not passed empirical research, and it won't because it's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's not bullshit. Again, if you know me, you know what I teach. I teach the Bible is the greatest book ever written. It's one of the greatest books ever written. You must read it and understand because in it is the path. It's the key. It's telling you everything that you need to know that's going to lead you to where you got to go. Jesus never existed. Jesus is you. Jesus tells you this in the book. So it's a lot to all this that you have to understand. But when it comes to the history, the proven history of the biblical manuscripts, what I just gave you guys is the facts, plain and simple. So real quick, let me elaborate on the parts that, because you got to give the Hebrew Israelites a little bit of credit because at least they got it to you guys, this understanding of these Hebrews being black, right? And then we have the stories. So just like as I was basically alluding to how the Romans are basically telling you, what happened to them as far as the Christians being persecuted is basically what they was doing to the Jews, after this whole revolt. It's the same thing. So we look at the Old Testament and we look at first of all, one, Moses comes down, right? 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me, right? Thou shalt not kill, steal, or what have you. We get the 10 Commandments. God immediately commands the Hebrews, the Israelites, to break those commandments. He commands them to break them. You gave them the 10 Commandments, then you commanded them to break the commandments, right? How did he do that? He told them to go kill and go steal. Go kill the Jebusites, the Hivites, the Girgashites, the Perizzites, all these guys, the Hittites, Canaanites. Go and kill them. Leave nothing alive. And they killed them and they split up their stuff. And the account of this stuff is in the book, right? So we have this happen. And then again, when you trace back these people, these tribes in the Bible, the Jebusites and all of them, they go back to the line of Ham, which Ham is supposed to be the progenitor of the black race, black people. There's no history, proven history about any of these tribes in the Bible. So obviously they're alluding to actual black people, African people that existed in these lands that they took. Look, what's wrong with y'all? Put it together. We have the conquest of Greece and Rome, right? We have this biblical story of these Israelites going out and conquering. It only fit one people as far as the conquest, and that's the Greeks, right? What is Septuagint written in? Greek. New Testament written in Greek, right? But we go look at Greek history and look at the wars of the Diadochi, where you had them after Alexander died, going out and conquering Northern Africa, conquering Europe, right? They're the only people that fit this conquest. It just so happened to be the conquest of black people, right? It's right there telling you what's going on and what happened. That's something we can look at and prove what happened. You're not going to be able to prove this stuff happened as far as the conquest of the Israelites because nobody talks about these people. Nobody talks about Herodotus never mentions the Jews. He doesn't mention them. Now, this is a Greek historian. If all this stuff was going on where you have the Greeks being mentioned in the Bible, who is being mentioned in the Bible? The Greeks and the Romans. Huh? And then you read the fact that you have with Paul, who supposedly wrote Romans. What was Paul telling these people? Hey, get the people to do this. Basically giving them rules and laws or what have you. And Romans is telling you what? Obey your government. That the government, your government, was ordained by God, right? These people, the powers that be, were ordained of God. Pay your taxes, obey your government, all the stuff that's in Romans is pertaining to basically governments and ruling people is what the people should obey. It's in there, right? So what does that sound like to you? That these people, well, getting people indoctrinated, giving them laws and rules based on religion that they controlled. So they can do everything now based off of these laws and rules. The same thing we see today. It's the same shit. That it's countries now. We still use religion, but it's like if you're a citizen of this country, you have to obey this because you're a citizen. Now, if you get people to go out there and get their guts spilled all over the ground and give their lives because of religion, right now it's because of, God and country, patriot. But back then, you have to think about it. What would make a person, I talked about this before, what would make a person pick up a sword? I mean, that's some nasty work. Pick up a sword, a spear, a mace, all that stuff. Run out in a battle where you got 100 people coming at you with the same type of equipment. And you're going to stand there and get your shit bashed in for what? Because some nigga told you to do it? Huh? You're going to get your head cut off, your guts all over the ground, just like that. Family, wife, don't have no father. Just like that. For what? You had to really get the people to believe in something because, I don't think your odds of surviving are very low. So what type of money, is there? You have to be desperate. It has to be something. But these people believed. We read about Valhalla, these people talking about going to, heaven and so many amazing places if they died, and it was dying for the religion. And even when the Jews was being persecuted after this whole war, the people that was left behind, if they was practicing, if they did anything Jewish, they was persecuted, they was hung, right? They was put on a cross, they was crucified. So this stuff we can see, as I said, in the New Testament pertaining to the Christians, Jesus namely, was happening to the Jews. I talked about this with Josephus, who basically talked about going by and seeing people hanging on crosses or what have you, and pertaining it to Christians. But this is what they was doing to the Jews when you go and read about everything that was happening with the revolt, right? Shion, Kokhba, or what have you. So this is what was happening. When you read all this stuff and you start reading into it, it sounds the same as what was happening to, the Christians, supposedly. So yeah. There's so much I left out for time's sake because I didn't want to make this a super long video. I think I did enough with this video and Dad's game and a bunch of other stuff that's on here. But at the end of the day, we all know Christians are going to accept what they want to accept. It don't matter what you say. 1 + 1 is 7 to them. It's not 2. So it is what it is. This video is namely for my people, the Christians who I talked to, or former Christians I talked to, who wanted a little bit more information and wasn't able to find it, to their satisfaction. Hopefully this video helps. This was for you guys. I really appreciate the conversations that we had and, just the good spirited conversations and people just really seeking knowledge and not, a status or trying to be above somebody. And I'm not coming for nobody's position or title or nothing like that. I'm simply about the truth. And when you cross that line, as I said before, I'm going to defend it. I don't care who you is. Now, I may not look like what you want me to look like, or I might not be the most entertaining, elegant, speaking person or what have you, but I stand on the truth and I'm going to always do that. Plain and simple. I'm going to put it out, especially when it's pertaining to us, when it's pertaining to our history, because we have been so, led astray, corrupted, and destroyed by this gospel. It don't make no sense. And we don't follow it. So it's the most craziest mind control that's out there for Black people. We don't follow this shit. So why are you holding on to something that you know in your heart you don't follow? You don't really believe in it. So what are you doing? So people will argue with you. I'm a Black man trying to help Black people, trying to help everybody, but they will argue you down about this Bible and they do not follow it. What is that? That is mind control. But yeah, come over here with truth that's false. You can't prove it. We're not accepting it. So, I'm going to be critical about stuff that I hear that people are saying is true pertaining to biblical religion or anything that's, along the lines of these topics that we talk about in this, conscious circle or in this whole movement of information. So you guys should be more critical. You guys shouldn't be allowing people to just step in and say anything to you. This dude literally came on there, and you got a lot of people that's just brain whitewashed looking at this guy and just believing everything that comes out when the dude have said some outrageous stuff, just like Billy Carson. Same type of outrageous stuff. And the Bible itself is outrageous. If you believe in 500-year-old man spending 100 years building an ark, two of all these animals on there, all the spookism, flying fire chariots, talking snakes and donkeys, powers of Elijah, all that stuff. And to discredit or try to talk down about another religion or doctrine to bring validity or try to get some validity to Christianity is absolutely retarded, because it's in the same boat. It's in the same boat of any doctrine that you think is crazy and ludicrous. Christianity is in the same boat. And if you don't know the history, continue to study the history and follow the history, you're going to be stuck in it. You're not going to know what's going on or what happened. But you guys need to understand true history and what has been going on over the years. But yeah, before I lose my voice, I'm in this video off. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Merkabah Scholar Society members, by the way, links are in the description for anybody that's still trying to join. Make sure you guys check your calendars tomorrow. So the calendars will be up there. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. So you guys will see the new calendars. A lot of stuff coming up. You'll see on the calendar how everything falls out, basically our schedule. So you guys will see that. But website is up. New stuff being added. A lot going on. I wanted to get this video out. Moving around, doing some things. Got to take care of some business. But we're going to get it back in gear real soon. I appreciate you guys' patience. Merkabah Academy is going to be open soon to the public. So you guys will see how it goes. We'll get into all that when the time comes, but it's a lot going on. And Never Pagan members, you guys will still get the new videos that come out as far as for, digital DVDs, any new stuff that comes up. We still got the Bible series still. You guys are still going to get that. We still have a lot of videos and series to finish off. All that stuff is going to come out. A lot going on this year. So just stay tuned. And I appreciate everybody's patience on everything. And yeah, any new information, I'll be on it. We got a lot to look forward to. Keep buying XRP. Stay on your crypto. We'll get into all that. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to watch. Peace.